All right, we're less than a month away from the Windows 10 end of life for features and updates and security updates. So today we're going to talk about what that means. We're going to talk about some of the course of action you might want to consider if you're still running Windows 10. And kind of some potential small workarounds, but it's the last time we had this kind of discussion actually was when Windows 8.1 was end of life because Windows 10 moved in. It's just kind of a funny story though, because Windows 10 was actually marketed and advertised as the last version of Windows. But obviously we have 11, so that was a lie. Introducing the XTM3 from Fantex, micro ATX chassis built for power and performance. Compact yet packed with potential, the XTM3 features support for rear connect motherboards, dedicated radiator space at the top, and triple fan locations at the bottom to help keep your GPU cool. With its innovative layout and sleek, clean design, the XTM3 is ready to take on almost any gaming PC configuration and cooling challenge. Check out the link in the description for more details. So to kind of build upon what I meant about the whole last version of Windows, Microsoft had officially announced, like back in the day, that Windows 10 would be the last version of its traditional operating system, and the decision reflects a shift towards continuous updates and models, where Windows will evolve over time rather than have these major updates. If you go back to 2015 or so when Windows 10 first came out, that was what scared a lot of people into thinking that there was going to be subscription-based operating system. Like Windows is going away, but now it's going to be a subscription-based OS that's continuously evolving. Clearly, that model hasn't gone fully into effect yet. I have no doubt Microsoft's probably still working towards that, but it's just sort of funny that they kind of abandoned those plans and they came out with 11 being a full version of Windows and a EULA-based model and all that, which is an end-user license agreement. But I digress. Let's go ahead and talk about what this means for you. So first of all, Windows 10 did launch back in 2015. If it doesn't seem like it's been a decade, it has. And that's what's crazy, is I remember Windows 10 came out, I was still on Windows 8.1. I was a very reluctant updater. I was happy with 8.1. And then we ended up moving to 10. We kind of had to move to 10 for various features and stuff. And then Windows 11 was a way that a lot of folks were kind of really pushed into having to update because of the fact that when it came to the scheduler with asynchronous CPUs, right, E-core, P-core stuff for Intel, the scheduler was kind of hidden behind the Windows 10 or Windows 11 scheduler and design. So you kind of were forced to upgrade to Windows 11 in 2021 when it came out. For that, same thing with the Ryzen and the power profiles and the full support for the chiplet design was again stuck behind the Windows 11 paywall. But anyway, I digress. The official support for Windows 10 ends October 14th, 2025. Hey, one day before my wedding anniversary. Anyway, what does end of life mean? It doesn't mean your Windows 10 is gonna stop working. I have seen a lot of people sort of doom and gloom, like, oh my God, your Windows 10 is no longer gonna work. No, it just means that you're not getting any more updates or bug fixes, feature updates. But the most important part is you're not getting any more technical support for it, and you're not getting any more security updates for it. Now, security updates is the kind of thing that a lot of people back in the day would have been like, so what? It doesn't matter. I'm not a high profile. I'm not really a target. But everyone's a target these days when it comes to malware, when it comes to Bitdefender type stuff, when it comes down to even bootloader level viruses that will, ransomware, that sort of stuff. Everyone is at risk for that, especially if you start going to nefarious sites or anywhere where there's file sharing or peer-to-peer, you are even more exposed for that sort of stuff. So that's why the security updates is kind of a big deal. So it really does expose you to more exploits once the end of life happens, which is officially October 14th, which is less than a month from now. But here's what the end user license agreement says. And I bring this up because nobody ever reads it. The same thing for games. You want to play your game, you load it up for the first time, you're like, yeah, scroll, accept, go. It's kind of like the whole idea, you don't own the game. You don't own the game. There's so much discussion, and rightfully so, discussion around the whole idea of license agreements, because you don't own Windows just because you paid for it. You paid for the right to have a license and access to it, but you don't own the code, you don't own the program. The same thing is true with games and stuff today, which is why when game servers go down, people get all up in a roar like, I bought the game. You didn't, you bought the license to play the game as long as it exists and is available to you. And I only bring that up because I worked in a software development environment from 2006 to 2015. And trust me, nobody ever reads the EULAs. But there are some funny memes that came out of that. The whole if buying a game isn't ownership, then pirating it isn't theft. But now we're talking about an ethics line that we're walking down. But anyway, I'm going to pull this back. That's a whole different discussion here. The Microsoft EULA typically states that it's not obligated to provide support or updates beyond its defined life cycle. Now, the only problem there is they don't define the life cycle up front. So you don't know necessarily if you're like, oh, I'm only going to get a year of use out of this because it's 9 years into its 10-year life cycle. I don't think Microsoft even knows necessarily how long the life cycle is going to be. But the point is, neither do you. It's never really explicitly stated. The users accept that the OS may eventually stop receiving updates and that continued use is at their own risk. But again, it's not defined. The dates aren't defined. I'm sure Windows 10 users right now are being bombarded, like legitimate installs. I'm not talking about cracked versions or script activated versions. I'm talking about you bought the key, it's tied to your Microsoft account, it's a full-fledged version, proper, legitimate version of Windows. I bet you they're being bombarded right now. Update to 11, update to 11, update to 11, end of life, end of life. So kind of like Windows 8 saw when 8.1 came out, and then what 8.1 saw when 10 came out, and the same thing when 11 came out. Remember, 11 was even free. 11 was free for the first year because they wanted people to update to 11 because 11 was much better at stealing your data. But anyway, example phrasing here is that Microsoft may cease providing security updates or support for the software after the end of support lifecycle. You are solely responsible for ensuring your system remains secure beyond that point. So, yeah, the language is there, but again, like I said, it's not clearly defined what those dates and stuff are. So you're kind of guessing at that point. Now, Windows 11 is the obvious successor. Windows 11 came out in October of 2021. And it's obviously heavily marketed around modern security and user experience refresh and better data stealing. Anyway, something in my throat there. Now here's the upgrade challenges for you if you're on Windows 10 and you've been running this since as far back as 2015. Let's say you were an early adopter. Windows 11 officially requires TPM or Trusted Platform Module 2.0 and Secure Boot enabled in a UEFI. Now, if you're running hardware from back in 2015, it's very unlikely that it's going to, out of the box without any sort of registry tweaks or any other tweaks within your system, to be able to just install Windows 11. In fact, you'd probably tell Windows, like, hey, I want to install Windows 11. It would go through and then say, this system is not compatible with Windows 11. Now, there are workarounds. We're not going to talk about that in this video. We will probably do a separate video to make it just a quick, easy source for people to be like, okay, I've got an old platform. It doesn't have TPM 2.0. It doesn't have Secure Boot, but you can still run Windows 11, by the way. Just want to point that out. You can, but it's not an officially supported process to make that work, because Windows is heavily pushing TPM 2.0, and that's because of all of the hardware level exploits that have existed within the CPUs and the microcode and all that. That's why TPM is very important. But anyway, you require an Intel 8th gen or beyond and a Ryzen 2000 and beyond to have official TPM and Secure Boot support, or TPM 2.0 and Secure Boot. So obviously, if you installed Windows 10 in 2015 when it came out, but you were running older hardware at that time, you clearly are not Windows 11 ready. Also too, if you've installed your operating system under a legacy BIOS and not a UEFI BIOS, that's another level of problem when it comes to trying to upgrade to Windows 11, because it requires UEFI, not legacy. But there are lots of workarounds. Unfortunately, the workarounds are going to leave you exposed to a lot of those hardware level exploits that we already talked about. But I guess that's for you to really weigh the risk here, whether or not it's worth risking for you. But the thing is, Windows 10 is obviously going to become risky in its own right, because it's no longer going to be getting security updates to keep you safe from any of those exploits as they're discovered and patched. So you kind of have a choice here of stay unsecure on Windows 10, or update to Windows 11 if you're on older hardware that doesn't support TPM 2.0 and Secure Boot, which is just going to make you on Windows 11 but unsecure, or upgrade your hardware. So I don't know, I feel like this might be the final push some people need to feel like, okay, maybe it is time to seek an upgrade. It's just unfortunately a really expensive time to upgrade your PC regardless of the level of hardware you're looking for. But let's consider this. Anything that existed in 2015, even high-level hardware, is going to be outpaced by the low-level hardware that exists today. So there is that. Like if you were running like a Ryzen and an AM5 like 7600X or a 9600X, and like a B series budget motherboard, and DDR5, even 16 gigs of DDR5, even though 32 gigs is kind of like the sweet spot now for PCs. That is going to be leaps and bounds faster and better than anything you had in 2015, especially if it was older hardware in 2015. So just kind of keep that in mind. You don't have to spend a lot today. But if it gets you up and running and secure and you're in an environment where that truly matters, let's say you do run a small business or whatever, you got a few systems, you had old hardware at the time, you're on Windows 10 and you truly are concerned about the security of those systems, this is something you have to think about. It might be time to upgrade your hardware just to make sure you're fully compliant with all of the security and the requirements to keep your system as secure as possible. Let's see here. Now, there are ways to extend your security updates for Windows. Unfortunately, for Windows 10 specifically, it requires money. Windows and Microsoft is not going to do that for free because they've done it for 10 years. Now, I'm assuming the reason why, and again, I'm only speaking from my dev background in the software development office I worked for almost 10 years. There has to be a team. It's probably going to be a skeleton crew at this point, but there has to be a team dedicated to spending time to continue doing the patching and the updates on an older OS. So they got to fund that somehow. And since Windows 10 isn't making them any money anymore, they're going to basically, put their hands in your pockets to make sure that cost is covered by you, not by them, because as far as they're concerned, they've supported the full life of Windows 10. Beyond that, it costs you money now. So let's go ahead and talk about the ESU, or the extended security updates for Windows 10. It's the first time Microsoft has actually offered this to individuals. This is the kind of thing they reserved for like when Windows 7 was end of life and XP. Man, XP had the longest support out of anything because XP was the first time we saw true widespread like commercial and enterprise adoption for Windows, and XP was everywhere. It's probably because of the fact of how many US government systems were running on XP that Microsoft truly had to keep supporting it as long as they did. But what do you do when you have potentially thousands and potentially even millions of people in the business and enterprise sector, whether it be government level or to civil level, like municipal districts and cities and all that, running this OS that obviously can become a target? We have seen hackers do ransomware at like power companies. We've seen it happen at hospitals, areas that truly are targets for this. Now the moment the end of life security updates for those people, it is a big problem. Now let's imagine you have a hospital, let's just say a single hospital in like a major metropolitan area. How many computers exist in that environment? I'm talking servers, I'm talking about main computers in offices, I'm talking about thin clients and all of the exam rooms and such. You've got all of the computers that are running all of the examination machinery, the MRI machines, the CT machines, x-rays, all that stuff. How easy is that going to be to just blanket upgrade? How many times have you gone to upgrade Windows and something breaks? Some driver was suddenly wrong, or the hardware compatibility issue. Could you imagine what a nightmare this is going to be for IT departments to get these infrastructures up and running? And we're not even talking about virtual offices. I'm not even talking about VPNs that connect many satellite offices together. It is a big deal when something goes end of life on an operating system. But anyway, I got off into a big tangent there. This is the first time we've seen individuals get offered a extension, or in this case, an ESU, or extended security updates. Unfortunately, it's going to cost you $30 per system. Now, obviously, if you've got to be running a legitimate copy of Windows 10, it's got to have to be tied to your Microsoft account, because that's how they're going to be, keeping the subscription going for you, so that you can pay for it that way. If you don't have your Windows 10 tied to your Microsoft account and stuff, you're going to have to, otherwise you're not going to be able to pay for the ESU. But it's only for 1 year. For individuals, it's 1 year, which means you're only going to get an additional support up to October of 2026. So it's 1 year. Now, for businesses and enterprises and organizations, they can do 1, 2, or 3 years, but obviously it becomes exponentially more expensive, and that's per system. So Microsoft, let's just say we've got 2,000 systems in one hospital. right? 2,000 systems in one hospital, and you want 3 years of service. That is $244 per device for that 3 years. Let's say you've got 2,000 computers that are running Windows 10 that must stay active on security updates for 3 years, times $244. That is $500,000 for one location to have 3 years of basic security updates. Now, there's no feature improvements, there's none of that. It's just security updates. I think 2,000 was a pretty conservative guess as to how many systems might exist in something like UCLA Medical Center. It's probably a lot more than that. To be honest, I might still be on XP if you want to know the truth, but I have no idea. I digress. So I have a feeling we're going to see a whole lot of either, I'm going to give Linux a try for the first time. If you're a gamer though, you're not. You're going to come back. You really are. Sorry, Linux. We tried. It was okay-ish, but not for the gaming side. It just truly not a gaming platform. It is a nerd tinkering, tweaking. I love playing around with the kernel, just customizing it. But that's the game, not games itself. Anyway, but we talked about the life cycle again. In the EULA, it just states, and quoted, the software will receive updates and support services only during the published life cycle. And then since it's an official EOL at this point, any claim you have to quote unquote damages due to, this is where I find it kind of interesting. They talk about claims for liability on issues arising from security updates or security issues after October 14th will be denied. Can you comment down below if you've ever had an actual damage claim against Microsoft and its OS where you got something? Is that a thing? I've never heard of that being a thing for Microsoft, but it's in the EULA. Maybe no one's just ever really pursued it. I don't know. But you can't claim damages after the vulnerabilities or due to vulnerabilities after October of 2025. That's probably more for the enterprise organization stuff, like I said. But Microsoft is well within its right to cut off updates. It's in the EULA, and people that are very upset about that, you can't be surprised. Like I said, I'm definitely devil's advocating here. It's in the EULA, and too many people just click accept without reading it. And the fact that you clicked accept, it's not just to move forward, it's to say, hey, I read and understand this. It's basically your Miranda rights, but it's the developer's Miranda rights, if you will, and you're accepting them. So if you just click the EULA and move forward and then claim ignorance, that doesn't work. You can't. It's the whole point of the EULA being there. You know why the EULA exists? Because early days of software, there was no EULA, and then the developers could really just Wild West and do whatever the hell they wanted, and there had to be consumer protection. Now the consumer protection is to say, you agree to the EULA. If the EULA has something in there that's just egregious or stupid that basically says, hey, we can have all of your data and we can sell it and do whatever we want with it, that exists in these EULAs, by the way, and you click accept, you don't have a leg to stand on to complain about it. I don't know, I personally feel like 10 years of free support for an operating system, after its initial purchasing agreement, which is the cost of paying for the OS, you paid for the license. I think 10 years is pretty reasonable, to be honest. But I mean, obviously we're gonna have a lot of difference of opinion down below. And I know there's a lot of people that believe that because they paid for the license agreement, that means they own the software, but you don't. But Windows 10 isn't going anywhere. You're just not getting any more updates for it. Future updates are ending no matter what, even if you extend the security updates, because that's all you're getting is security updates. But anyway, the EULA makes it clear the responsibility shifts entirely to the user once October 14th, 2025 arrives, if you don't extend it. Now, what I don't know on here, and I didn't actually check, and I'm just now thought about this, is whether or not you have to purchase the extension prior to October 14th, or if once you move beyond October 14th, if it's no longer available to you. Because that extension is only till October 2026. So if you were to, I'm assuming if you were to extend, let's say December of this year, it would still cost you $30 and you're only getting to October of 2026. You're not getting 12 months from the point at which you extend. You're only getting 12 months from the date of end of life, which is October 14th. I bet most of you are not gonna pay the $30. I bet you almost all of you are not gonna pay the $30. And I wouldn't blame you. Now there are workarounds. Like I said, there are workarounds to be able to get Windows 11 to work. But if you're using a workaround, or you're quote unquote using a cracked, non-legitimate version of Windows, or you're running hardware that does not meet the minimum hardware requirements for TPM 2.0 and the UEFI and Secure Boot, then you're still gonna be exposed. And that's why the only true recourse to stay fully secure is going to be to upgrade your hardware if you don't meet those minimum requirements. Now, if history has told us anything, it is currently 2025, Windows 11 came out in 2021. You could probably expect the same discussion happening right around 2031. Jesus Christ, that sounds really far away, but it's really not. Anyway, there we go. Let us know if you guys want us to make a video. We're gonna do it anyway, but I'm curious how many of you are interested in the true workaround to be able to install Windows 11 on hardware that doesn't actually support it. And maybe what we'll have to do is actually build a system that doesn't meet the requirements of TPM 2.0 and Secure Boot to show you physically how to do that. There are ways, and they definitely live in the gray area of ethics.